Hi, I'm Alia from Integrify Academy. We release the new YouTube video every Thursday, so hit the subscribe button and turn on your notification to make sure you do not miss any exciting news coming on your way. Today, I'm thrilled to walk you through the world of SASS. Let's dive in and explore what we could do with this powerful tool. So get ready and stay tuned to level up your styling game. Throughout this tutorial, we will discover a wide range of topics to give you a solid understanding of SASS and how to use it effectively in your project. Let's look at the agenda for today's tutorial. Now, as we have SASS up and running in our local machine, we could start explore more features from SASS. Let's start with variables. In SASS, variable is a powerful approach for us to reuse the value throughout our files. To declare a variable in SASS, we could start with a $sign followed by the name, colon, and value for the variables. Return to our demo. Let's create a background color variable to hold the color of our background in the application. So we would start with a $sign followed by the name of the variable, which is background-color. And then let's give a color code to this background color. Okay, so now I would try to use the background color in the whole body of the application. And we would define that by calling the body and define background color. Now you would pass along the name of the newly created variable in here, which is also background color. To compile and execute the file again, we can run the previous command with SASS, then the source file, colon the destination file. However, this execution would take lots of time as the code base grows and you would need to repeat this step several times. So instead, we would run the command line in watch mode. We could run SASS with --watch option, and this one would keep the compiler up and running. Similarly, we still pass in the name of the source file and the name of the destination file. And let's execute this one. Now you might see that our terminal is up and running. With any change in the code, the compiler would be executed again and we would have the newly updated CSS file. Now let's monitor the change in our index.html. Now if we give a refresh to our web browser, we can see the whole body background color is changed into our assigned color. Before we move on with other features in SASS, we would need to mention importing and partials, which are essentials for organizing and structuring your code, allowing you to keep your styles easy to read and work with. Partials are the smaller SASS file which contain only a portion of your code and won't get compiled to the CSS file. And normally we use partials to contain or style a small portion of the HTML document. To start with, I would divide my HTML body into several sections. As I have refactored my code now, we can see that we have the new layout in the web browser. Now we have header, which contain the heading 1 and a navigation bar. We have several articles created in the main section of the body. And then we have a footer section, which contain a registration form to subscribe. Let's review the new HTML document. As you can see, 3 sectors in here. The header one, the main section with several articles, and finally, the footer with subscription form. So we would start trying to style this index.html file. However, it's not ideal to put all the code into one styles.scss file. Instead, we would start refactor all the styling files by separating them into the smaller partials file. First, I would create a folder and call that SASS. Now, to create the partials file, you would name them with the underscore. And I want to create a partial file to contain all the variables inside my application. And I would name it variables.scss. Once I have defined all the colors for the application, I would keep continuing and define the typographies or the font which could be used in this application. And let's create another partial file which is named with first underscore and then typography. Now we would start with some typography for all the text in our body. Start with a font family. I would pick one and modify this one into sans serif because this is my favorite one. And since I want to use the color for the text and some background for the whole body, I would need to reuse the predefined variables which I created in the variables file. So now we would need to import those variables for use. In SASS, you can use the use directive to import a module into another file, and we can start with the symbol at and then use and then path to the file we want to import. Because they are in the same directory, we just need to mention the file name, and you need to remember the semicolon in the end of the line. Now we have imported a module variable into the file typography.scss. To use all the variables inside this variables file, we can use like the following. First, we need to mention the file name, which is variables, and then dot. Now we need to mention also the variable name, which is primary hyphen color in this case. For now, we have defined the font family and the text color for our whole body. However, this style won't be in effect until we import them into the main styling file. For the reason is we only compile the main styling file. Other partial file, we wouldn't compile it. And for the style in the partial files to get affected, we would need to import those into the main file. So to start with, I would first remove all the decoration we made previously in the main file, and I only import the partials file in here. So to import, we would use directive following by the path of the file. Because the partial file live in the SASS folder, so we would need to import those in here. Now we have the typography file imported into the main file. We can monitor the change in our CSS. As you can see in our CSS file, we can have the font family and the color interpreted from these variables we created in the partial file. So now we can see the changes in our HTML document. Let's give it a refresh. And now you can see both the font family and the font color would be changed into a new one as we defined. To continue with, we can keep adding more partial files and keep our main file as clean as possible. The main purpose is we only mention some global decoration in the main file, and other smaller part, other specific portion, we could leave all of those into the partial file. For example, now we would start decorating certain portion of our HTML document, starting with the header. And for that, I would create another file responsible for decorating the header file. And we would name them header.scss. Now we can start giving some specific style to the header. So to select any component in the HTML document, you can use the same CSS selector by selecting the whole header section. And you can start giving the style definition in here. For example, we can start align all the text of the header to the center of its container. And we can do that with text align and push them to the center. However, again, all of the defined style won't be applied until we import the file into the main styling file. We would need to use the use directive again, and followed by the path of the file we want to include. Now, if we monitor the file, we could see that all the text has been correctly aligned to the center of the page, which is a really nice feature. Originally, we can have two different approaches to import certain files into other CSS file. One is we using the use directive, like the example we have done before. There could be another way to use the import directive, which also start with the @ followed by import, and you give the path of the file. However, this method is not recommended. For the reason is that when you use the use directive, even if you mistakenly import the file several times, with the use directive, file is loaded only once, but with import, as many times you import the files would be loaded into the main file several times accordingly. Therefore, it would cost you the performance in case you use import of one file several times. So to avoid this case and increase the performance of our application, I would recommend to use the use directive instead of the import one. Next, we would explore mixing and extend, another feature in SASS which allow you to reuse block of code and share your styles in a more modular way. Mixing is the function which generates the block of code. We can use mixing to generate the share features, but with some dynamic and custom-made decoration for several components in our HTML elements. So we can try now to decorate the link element in our HTML navbar, and while this link might share several properties, it would also can have their own custom-made style. So for that, missing would be the best choice. We would navigate again to the header file, and in here, I can choose all the link element, and now we can use first remove all the default decoration by add text decoration and then remove it to none. So now all the text have no default decoration of underline anymore. What I want to do first, I want each child element inside the link element can have a bit of border, like a border with the rounded corner, but then every link element can have a different color of the border. So we would create a missing for that, while each element can have the same size of border and border radius. They would be different in the border color. So to create a missing, you would start with the missing directive, and then we give the missing a name. Now we would give it a name, link border. And now we start declare the style. I want every link to have border radius of 10 pixel, and I want it to have border style of dashed, but then I want the home link to have another border color, and the about link has again another border color. And for that, the border color must be declared dynamically. So the way we can do that is using the arguments. So with missing, you can add the argument in here, and you can name your argument with any placeholder name. For example, in this case, I would name them border color with the $sign, of course, because it is a variable. Then I would assign the border color for each element according to the border color argument we would pass in later on. Now we have a missing called link border. We should generate the block of code for every element which would be used with this missing. So now I would select each link element by using the end child. And now we would say the first child would have the missing called link border, but with the border color of primary color, for example. So let's choose the first child. And in our case, the first child would be the home link because it appears first in the list of the link element. So now to include the missing link border in the first child element, you can use another directive called include. And include is a way you can select to use the missing within the code block. And now we need to give in the name of the missing we just created, which is link border. And now we need to pass one argument for border color. So let's say I want to use the variable color for, let's say, primary color in this case. So first, I would need to import the variables file into this header.scss. Let's use use directive and include the variables in here. Now we can call the primary color inside the variables model. And let's continue by decorating the second child in the list of link element. The second child in the list would be the about link. And now, similar to the first child, we would use the include directive to insert the link border code block into this child. And for the name, I would use the secondary variable color. Okay, secondary color. Now let's observe the change of style. We have some secondary. Oh, I have a typo in here. Let's fix that. Now let's refresh it again. As you can see now, we have two links with almost same style of the border. However, one is green dashed and another one is like yellow dashed. We can give them some padding to make sure it's easier to read. We can go back to the link border and add some padding. Now let's add like 2 pixels inside. So we have some spacing between the border and the text inside. And now it would be more visible. If we look at the code again, we can see that we created a function called link border with one argument called border color. And then in each child element, we use the include directive to call the function. And this function would actually return the block of code inside each child element, but more dynamic with the passed in argument. If we observe the change in styles.css file now, you might see we have two end child of the link element, and now each child would have different border color. That is because the compiler has interpreted the color variables into the actual color and pass it into our CSS style. Apart from using the mixin function to generate a new block of code, we also can use another concept called extend to inherit the code syntax from the previous code block. And we would try it right now to see the differences between mixin and extend. Let's move into the main sector of our body. We would try to create a formal united layout for all the articles in the main sector. For that, we first need to create a partial file, and I would name it underscore main.scss. Let's first select each child articles inside the main part of the body. And we will start with the article and the CSS selector called and child. We have 3 children inside the main part of the body. So I would have and child 1, and child 2, and child 3. What do I want to have in each article element in here? I want them to have different background color, but the same kind of border, and I want them to have shared properties such as the align text to the center, for example. So let's write down everything as the normal way we might write in CSS, and then we would consider the code refactor. So with the background color, I want the first child to have the same background color as the body background. And for that, I want to reuse the variables we have created in another file. Let's use the use directive and call the variables file in here. And now we can use a file called variables dot we have pre-made color called background color. Okay, seems like I forgot the colon in the end. Now for the second child, with the same syntax, but at this time, we would choose the primary color. And last one, the third child, we would choose the secondary color. And now let's observe the newly created style in our web browser. Each child now would have a different background color. However, for the second child, because of the text color, I would change it into the white color or the background color so it's easier to read. Now I would change the text or the color of the text into the same as the background color. So the color would be a bit visible to our eyes. Now that looks better. However, I want to have a bit of border radius as well as the padding into each article. And for that, let's add border radius of 10 pixel as well as the padding of 20 pixel and copy paste into other code block. Now we can observe the change again. Now it looks much better. However, we can see lots of code repetition inside our code. So maybe we can use the previous mission to grab the block of code. I would first create a mission in here. And I would name it article style. Now we can grab the background color, the border radius, and the padding inside to make it more dynamic color. Sorry, to make it a more dynamic style. Apart from background color, everything else would stay the same, right? So I only pass background color as the argument. And I would use the name background color as well. And now we can use the name background color in here. So for other child, we can modify the code by using include and the missing function. And now we can pass in the name of the color, which is variables dot. We shouldn't have the dollar sign because it's the module, not the variable itself. Now, the third one should have secondary color. So if you observe now and we refresh the website, okay, I have some syntax in here. What was that? Integrify mixin article style. Okay, I might, okay, because I declare the mixin after I use it, so I would need to move it on the top. Now let's check it again. We get our web browser back up and running. Let's check now what would be the difference when we put the include in here. Include is, again, put the function we created from mixin into the new code block inside the selector. So behind the scene, all the code still be created inside the selector. We do not really save any lines of code. Only in SASS we write less, but in the end of the day, the amount of code we generated are still the same. So mixin would not be really efficient in the way of avoiding code repetition. It only beneficial in the way that we can dynamically pass the variables as the arguments inside the function. So in case we have no need to pass the variables, we can use another concept, which is the extent. And to create the extent, it's like a code block where other code block would inherit from without generating the new lines of code after compiled. So to create a missing, you would first start by creating a placeholder with the percentage sign. This is a way to create the placeholder in SASS, and the placeholder won't get compiled. It would be only inherited but not compiled. So it would save lots of code lines. Let's try that and then we could observe. I would name that another article style. Okay, and now we would redefine the style, which doesn't need to be dynamic. Basically, the border and the padding. If we have the border and the padding in here, we can inherit in other code block. For example, now I would cut from the first and the second child to use the code from the extend method. You would need to use also the extend directive and give in the name. Start with $sign and then another article style. We would apply the same extend in the third child, and then we can compare. Okay, I would need to restart my terminal again. And let's check the style.scss. In the first child and the second child, you might see that border radius and padding is not included in the selector as the way the third child has, but instead on the top, they would have one common share property by selected both the first child and the second child, and then give the border radius to both of them at the same time. So instead of creating extra code in every selector, they would group them in one selector only and write the code again once. So with the extend method, you would save more lines of code. However, it is like a trade-off between missing and extend. With extend, you cannot go more dynamic as the way you go with missing. You cannot define a function. But with extend, you can avoid new generation of code. So if in case you need a function to pass the dynamic feature, then go with missing. And in case you want to create the share properties without any dynamic customization, then the better strategy to go is to create the extend. After exploring the mixin and extend, we would come to the last feature in SASS, which is nesting. This is, again, another powerful feature in SASS to help us writing the code in a more organized and structured way. Nesting in SASS is a powerful feature that allows you to write more structured and organized styles by nesting the child selectors inside the parent selectors. This can make your SASS code more readable and maintainable by closely reflecting the structure of your HTML markup. Let's look at an example of nesting in SASS using the footer. In this example, we have nested the form and the heading 3 HTML element inside their respective parent selectors. This helps to show the relationship between these elements in the HTML structure. Let's look at the compiled output of the CSS file. We can see from the compiled CSS, that the code has been compiled into the CSS selector. And also we can notice the N symbol over here. The N symbol represents the parent selector and can be used to create a more complex nested selectors, such as the pseudo class or the pseudo elements. While nesting can make your SASS code more structured and organized, it's important not to overuse it, since the excessive nesting can make your code harder to maintain and lead to overly specific selectors, which can be really difficult to override when needed. So we have a good rule of thumb, which is to limit the nesting to maximum 3 levels deep. As we wrap up this tutorial today, I hope you've gained a deeper understanding of the features in SASS, such as the variables, mixins, extends, and nesting. By incorporating these concepts into your workflow, you can write more modular, maintainable, and efficient styles for your project. Remember to always follow the best practices, such as organizing your code into partials, using variables for the common values, and avoiding excessive nesting. Thank you for joining me in this tutorial, and I wish you all the best of luck in your future web development projects.